Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 202, recorded live on Monday, June 9th, 2014. I am your host, Todd Klindt, and I'll be with you all night. So, we're in this together. I'm not going anywhere. And the folks that make this all possible are the folks at Rackspace.com. Well, Rackspace, but their website is Rackspace.com. And they're my very benevolent employers. They gave me that PowerPoint template, that flag, this cup, all kinds of great stuff. If you'd like to know what other great things we have at Rackspace, you can go to sharepoint.rackspace.com. We've got all kinds of information there about the products that we offer. We got games and white papers and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And they promise not to fire me if you guys go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com. So go ahead and do that. That's sharepoint.rackspace.com. Tell them I sent you, and it'll all be great. All right, let's move on to the production notes. Production last week I think was pretty good. The audio video thing's still coming up a little bit and got a little bit of static from my mic, and I completely forgot to check that out. So hopefully we're not getting that again this week, but I might need to look into that a little bit. But everything went pretty well. Last week I was wearing my TechSmith shirt that I got for free at TechEd. This week my free shirt was from Splunk. Give you a minute to read this here. And the shirt's a little big. They ran out of my size, so they rounded up, which is probably better than them rounding down, because nobody wants to see me in like one of those belly shirts. It's horrible. But Splunk, they make great monitoring software and all that. Adrian Hall is a good friend of mine, and he made sure and hooked me up. And you can go to splunk.com and find out all about their stuff. They got some SharePoint stuff and all kinds of great stuff. And their software is even better than their t-shirts, if you can believe that. So good stuff there at Splunk. And also for production notes, I wanted to remind folks, I've got a few European listeners out there, and I know that this show is at a very inconvenient time for you folks in Europe. And so if you would like to watch this live and heckle in person, like the folks in the chat room are right now, all of the Netcast hooligans, I'm going to do a European broadcast of the Netcast, so like 12 hours off. I'll do it 8:30 in the morning my time or something like that. That's up to you guys. But if you're interested in something like that, if there's enough of you that get a hold of me, I will do that. So go ahead and hit me up at Todd Klindt on Twitter, or you can email me at todd.klindt@rackspace.com, and just let me know. Say, hey, I'm in Europe and I would love to watch it live. Or if you're in the U.S. and would rather watch this during the day and slack off at work instead of watching it at night, let me know. And we'll see if we can't put that together for you. I did one of those a couple of years ago. Went pretty well. Got a little different crowd in the chat room. It was good. But I've had a couple of people come up to me at various conferences and ask for that. So I want to make sure out there. I'm a man of the people, and what the people want, the people get. So I would be willing to do that for you folks. All right, on to the topics. It has been a busy week for patches. My little patch, my SharePoint 2013's build list and wiki pages and Twitter accounts, they have been just off the hook. I think that's what the kids are saying right now, and I think that means what I think it means. Of course. Anyway, it has just been really busy, and I don't know about you guys, but I get my news from the internet every once in a while in one of those web browsers, and I'm always disgusted at these clickbaiting, headlines, intentionally vague headlines to try to get you to click the thing, and then it's one of those articles, and hate all that where you got to click and blah. But I was thinking this week. I was going to post a blog post about the security patch MS14-022, and I was thinking about naming the blog post, "Man installs MS14-022, and you won't believe what happened next," to try to get people to click it. But it has been one of those weeks. So first off, if you if you're going to be patching your SharePoint servers at all, 2010 or 2013, do yourself a favor and do your fellow SharePoint admins a favor and go out to toddklindt.com/sp2010builds or toddklindt.com/sp2013builds. Find the patch that you're looking to install and then click the notes and regressions thing on the right-hand side and see what problems that patch has, because I try to keep them all there, and I got a bunch of people on Twitter that report them to me, and the ones that I can reproduce, I put them all in there. But you'll save yourself a lot of pain, and potentially, if you find something there, we'll put it out there, but you can help everybody out. But those pages have been really, really active the last few days. So one of the first ones I want to shout out is Bob Ulrich. Got a hold of me on Twitter and mentioned that they've updated the knowledge base article for MS 14-022, and if you don't have Service Pack 1 installed on your SharePoint 2013 farm, there is another patch that you have to install first, and that's KB2880963. That is only if you don't have Service Pack 1 installed. So thanks to Bob for shouting that one out to me. Trevor Seward, who's in the chat room tonight, has a MS 1422 known issues blog post, and he's updated that this week. Has some more information in there, so I've added that to my my wiki page for that patch. And I added a couple more notes to that wiki page. One of them was, if you have SharePoint Server, then you also need to install the foundation patches, because they patch separate things. So make sure you do both. And then if you, when you run these patches, as with any patch, you have to install, or you have to run the psconfig util afterwards. And that kind of buttons it all up. And you got to do that anytime you patch SharePoint. You got to do that. So be ready for that. Right now, the regressions haven't really changed a lot. We're just finding out more about them. It breaks the My Site people search link. It puts that extra characters in there. It has the same bug as the claims conversion bug, also on Trevor's site. So it's been kind of rough. And this particular patch is bad because it is one of those security patches. So you want to get that stinker on as quick as you can. But man, it just breaks stuff all over. So keep out for that. I get that. If you've got a religious person that you could have with you, a pastor or a shaman or something, a wizard, or just if you just have a wizard cloak, maybe put it on when you're installing this patch and when you're putting it on, because it's just bad news. But it fixes a fairly scary, remote exploit possibility. So you kind of want to put that thing on. One of the things, and this was a thing that came up in context for something else that I hadn't really thought of before, is my blog, well, it kind of stinks. And right now there's no way for any of you external folks to get alerts when I update anything. So I've got the two Twitter accounts, and so I've got the SP2010 patches and SP2013 patches, and I'm pretty good about tweeting out when I make changes to those to any of those pages. But if I do something like that on the weekend, then it gets lost in your Twitter stream, and obviously you're not going to put a list or anything like that for my Twitter accounts. So there's a chance you could miss that. So I was talking to somebody else about some other technical stuff a couple days ago, and they were asking about services that tell you when a public web page changes. And I thought, that would be great for people that are trying to keep up with this. So I don't have any that I recommend necessarily, but if you go out to Bing or Google or whatever and search for website changes or alert on website changes, there's a bunch of different services out there that offer this. But essentially, they just hit a web page, however many times, once an hour, whatever, and when that web page changes, they email you and let you know. So if you want to find out, when the new patches come out or whatever, you could do that change thing on my builds blog posts. And you could also do it on, the various wiki pages, the regressions pages. You could do that. And then as soon as I change something without me having to tweet anything out, you'll get an alert from whatever the service is. Like I said, I just got this idea a couple of days ago, and so I haven't really vetted it out much. But I'll look at a couple of those and see what good they are, because that's a good way for you guys to keep up to date. with the changes that I make. Also, I wanted to note that on the April 2014 cumulative update patch for SharePoint 2013, man, there's a lot of numbers in there. That was the one that broke the classic to claims migration. Trevor Seward has a page on that, and he added here last week a workaround for that. And the workaround is basically to do it the way you do it in SharePoint 2010. And that's it. So you have to do it manually, walk through it. That still seems to work. Hopefully, this is June, so hopefully we'll have a new set of CUs coming out this month that will hopefully fix those problems without adding too many more problems. So hopefully. But as always, Merrill Sanders is in the chat room tonight. Tech Rev Merrill. He got a hold of me on Twitter today, and he's seen a bug, and I won't talk about it now in case it doesn't pan out. But he's looking at Patch and Project Server. He'd heard about a bug he was seeing if I had, and we couldn't quite figure out for sure whether it's something to post or not. But he's going to look into it, and if he finds it out, he's going to let me know, and I'll update my wiki. So it's people like Trevor and Bob Ulrich and Merrill that are helping me keep all those bugs out there. So if you ever go to any of my regressions pages and see bugs out there, and that kind of helps you plan a little better for your patching, it's guys like that you should thank. So and I thank those guys. My page would be nothing without those guys helping out. So thanks to those guys. So the next thing, and this is kind of, we've been bagging on patches a little bit today, and they're not always bad. And I wanted to mention a couple of good things that the April 2014 cumulative update for SharePoint 2013 add. It's not just bug fixes, and it's not just breaking stuff, thank goodness, but they added a couple of pieces of functionality to it. One of them is they added some changes to OAuth to make hybrid environments work a little better. So with Service Pack 1, we got the ability to move OneDrive out to OneDrive for Business in Office 365. We got the ability to integrate social with Yammer, so we can kind of see this hybrid situation gelling a little bit better. In the April 2014 cumulative update, they added some code that allows you to use the client-side object model, or CSOM, within a SharePoint hosted app and use that environment to create site collections. And this is very similar to what folks can do with SharePoint Online, other places, multi-tenant SharePoint, that kind of stuff. But this is something you could do before, but you had to add some full trust code and all that. Now it's just built right into the product. And Vesa has a pretty good blog post on it. He talks about the steps that you walk through. Again, you have to have that April 2014 cumulative update installed. I don't necessarily know that I would recommend installing that right now, but hopefully when the next patch comes out and it's in much better shape, this functionality will be there as well. But essentially what you're doing is for your on-premises SharePoint, so this is for on-prem SharePoint, you can go into on-prem SharePoint now, and you can add the SharePoint Online tenant admin library to the web app's client callable libraries, which is a list of assemblies that client code can call. So now you can add this tenant admin code, this tenant admin assembly to that code, and then developers can write code that uses that. And so there's a little bit of fiddling you have to do on the server side. You need to approve that, add that to the callable library inside of your web app, and then you need to assign a couple of site collections for some stuff. But then your SharePoint hosted apps can create site collections. Now, for on-premises SharePoint, the value of this might seem less because you can always run full trust code. You can do that kind of stuff already. But the idea is to get the SharePoint Online and the SharePoint On-Prem functionality more in parity because, they each do things better. And also it just gives you another option. So you don't have to use full trust code. You can't do, you can do these other things, but now you can use client-side code. So you can do a bunch of things with that. So I think that's a great thing. It's going to be it's going to be interesting to see what else they add, because you can do a bunch of other things with SharePoint Online that you can't do with on-prem right now. So hopefully they'll get that fixed. Mark Chrisman in the chat room says that for every time I mention running full trust code, I need to wash my mouth out with soap and And say 5, hail Jeff Teepers. Of course, we don't say hail Jeff Teeper anymore because Jeff Teeper is not in the SharePoint. I should have planned for that better. But, that's the thing. Some places, full trust code makes sense. And so it's good for on-prem SharePoint. We can run that. But in other places, it doesn't make sense. So now having this option from 2 different places, running hosted app codes to create SharePoint site collections or full trust code. It's all about the flexibility. I like it. I'm not a developer. It doesn't really impact me. But I know that at Rackspace, we have customers that do all kinds of crazy things. And once there's a patch that adds this functionality, that is stable, and I would recommend putting on farms. We'll probably start talking about this with some of our customers. But that was cool, and it was good of Vesa to blog that. I appreciate that. All right, the next one is another one that is near and dear to my heart. I'm a SharePoint guy by trade. SharePoint is my favorite, but there's just a bunch of the other Microsoft technologies that I love, and Hyper-V is one of them. And this last week, I was doing some research for another project and stumbled across this TechNet article that is the best practice configurations for SharePoint 2013 on Hyper-V environments. So it's kind of a long, wandering paper. There's a lot of stuff in there, but there's some great things to take out of there, little nuggets. And this is good whether you as the SharePoint admin, if you are virtualizing SharePoint on your Hyper-V environment, or if you've got virtualization folks that have set up your Hyper-V farm and then you're waiting for them. So this, again, read the whole white paper. It's got a bunch of good stuff on it, but a couple of the nuggets that you should pull out, a couple of things that I saw immediately that jumped out at me. One was that SharePoint 2013 does not support dynamic memory. So Hyper-V, certainly the current version, I think the previous version, supported this idea of dynamic memory, where you could say, when a VM boots up, it gets 2 gig of RAM for sure, but then it can go all the way up to 10 gig of RAM. And basically the OS manages the RAM, and if it needs more RAM, then it requests more from the hypervisor, and then inside of Windows you can actually see the amount of available memory in Windows go up and down. It's kind of cool, except don't do that with SharePoint. There are a couple of pieces inside of SharePoint that really don't like that. And there's really not going to be any surprise part. You're not going to have to worry about sitting down when you hear this. But I think 2 of the biggest trouble spots inside of SharePoint 2013 are, when it comes to resources, is the distributed cache and search. And both of those don't like this dynamic memory. They both try to cache things. They take big chunks of RAM out for caching. And they're not the best citizens of the box. They don't really notice when these memory configurations move. So Microsoft officially does not support the dynamic memory for your SharePoint boxes. Might still be good for your AD boxes or whatever, that kind of stuff, but for your SharePoint boxes, it's not a good fit. The other thing that this talks about is not to oversubscribe CPUs, and there's some formulas in there. I think they do like 8-to-1 or something before they consider it oversubscribed. But be careful when you're doing that kind of stuff, and that's this ability of mapping more virtual CPUs than there are physical CPUs in the hypervisor. So don't do that. The good news about this is, while it seems kind of crappy that Microsoft is saying all this stuff, for you as the SharePoint administrator, it gives you a lot of leverage when you're talking to your virtualization team, because those guys are incredibly stingy with resources, and they have been for years. The more virtual machines they can get onto their hypervisors, the better they look, the more bonuses they get and all that kind of stuff. And so they're going to be really stingy. And in some cases that works out, and that's fine. But for some workloads, it doesn't. And when you go to them and you say, hey, I don't want you to dynamically allocate the RAM for my SharePoint boxes, well, they hear that from everybody. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants reserved RAM. But now you've got this document. You can say, hey, listen, this is an official Microsoft white paper. If we call them for support, we can't be doing this. It says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And it gives you a little bit of leverage when you're trying to make these the demands from them. So this is another one of those URLs. I don't hit it a lot, but I've got it bookmarked. Well, now I've got it in my Netcast notes here in OneNote, but it's just a good one to fall back on. After you've read it the first time and pulled the nuggets out, keep it handy so that if you ever need to get into one of those arguments with your virtualization folks, you can. Oh, this is a fun one. Excuse me. These days, I don't spend as much time fixing broken SharePoint as I have in the past. I do a lot more project stuff and things like that. And so I don't get a lot of these great in the trenches stories like I used to, but this is a good one. So last week had a customer who was having some problems with SharePoint 2010. Keep in mind this is SharePoint 2010 and the user profile service. The customer is a sharp guy, and so I was a little surprised he was having problems, honestly. But they had set up a user profile sync. They got everything from AD, and then they had set up their SharePoint 2010 farm as the authoritative source for profile pictures. So if somebody uploads a picture into SharePoint to their My Site, SharePoint resizes and all that, it syncs it back to AD, and then for this customer, then Exchange and Outlook and all that pull those pictures out of AD and they show up in email. It's pretty cool. It's kind of cheesy. Doesn't sound like it should be a big deal, but seeing people's picture in your email for, people you don't know and all that is pretty cool. So they had that set up and it was working pretty well. And then they noticed a while back that the pictures weren't syncing anymore. And they weren't syncing if a person who didn't have a picture uploaded one, it wouldn't show up in AD, though it would in SharePoint. And if somebody had a picture in SharePoint and updated it to a new one, it wouldn't show up in AD either. So it just looked like it was broken. And this customer, like I said, pretty sharp guy, went into SharePoint, looked around, everything was good, did a scary thing, went into the MIIS client exe to kind of see what was going on. And sure enough, he could see some errors in there. But if he went to the, and I forget which step it was like AD export or SharePoint export or one of those two, MOS export, it would say, it said exception, DLL error or something, which is kind of FIM's just catch all, I'm mad, I'm not going to do it. But there was no information there. He couldn't see what was going on. So he was kind of stuck. And he was, just a couple steps away from just blowing the whole user profile service away and starting over. But he gave us a call and got a hold of me and wanted to know if we could figure something out. So, it's been a while since I've tangled with the user profile service. Been a while since I'd done battle with it. And I was, I was ready for it. I think I left. I kind of retired on top when it came to the user profile service. And I felt like getting back in the ring and seeing what I could do. So, started poking around, and sure enough, there was really no information in FIM that was helpful. There was not a lot of information in SharePoint, though we did start a sync and then watch the ULS logs, and we could see some errors, we could see some stuff, and we kind of got some clues about what was going on, but nothing real concrete. So the next thing that we did was we went into the Windows event logs on the box itself, and kind of looked to see what errors, whether they had anything to do with SharePoint or not, that were going on at that time. And as we were scrolling through, and I did the thing where we had the event viewer up, I went to the right-hand side and did filter events, and I said only errors, warnings, and whatever the third one is, I forget. And so it's just nothing but bad news. And we started filtering out the things that we knew weren't it, the health analyzer things and all that. And so then we started seeing some patterns. And one of the things that showed up was a certificate error. And it was a certificate for one of their web apps. And he's like, we had to change our certificate a couple of months ago, and I'll look into that later. I'm like, I'm not a big believer in coincidences. When did this error start? And he tells me, well, we're not entirely sure. Somebody had to report it. And I'm like, okay, well, when did you fiddle with your certificate last? And he's like, I remember a couple of months ago. I'm like, is there any chance that this quit working when you changed your certificate? He's like, maybe. And I'm like, and we're getting the certificate error. All right. So sure enough, we run a sync. That certificate error shows up. We go into the ULS logs. We're getting a certificate error. But it was a weird one. So their web apps, their My Site web apps, their content web apps and all that are all over SSL. And they've got a wildcard cert for both of those web apps. So anything, star.contoso.com, it's all in there. So we looked into the error a little bit more, and it said that the certificates issuer was not a trusted issuer. So when you import a certificate, there's kind of two steps. The certificate itself has to be valid. It has to, be within the time frame the certificate is valid. It has to match the machine or whatever resource you're trying to encrypt. But also, Windows has to trust the authority that issued that certificate. And out of the box, Windows trusts a bunch of them. And it trusts all the big ones, honestly. It's not normally an issue anymore. But that's one of the problems you'll see if you've got an internal, like I have an internal AD here at home. If I publish a certificate from that, it'll work great on all my machines. But if I start encrypting my public website with it, all you guys will get an error. The certificate itself is valid, but your server doesn't trust the issuing authority, which is my server. Makes good sense. Okay. So this error that always came up when he did a profile import said that the issuer for that certificate wasn't trusted. So what do? You go to the certificate manager, you find the certificate, you look at the certificate path to see if it's good. It's good. So just to be super sure, we went into the trusted authorities in the, the machine certificate stuff. The issuer's in there. So it seemed kind of nonsensical that the certificate that we knew it was the same certificate. We were looking at the thumbprint. It was the right certificate. And the issuer was there, but we kept getting this error that said the issuer wasn't trusted. And we got it every time we ran a sync. So there was no coincidence that was what was going on. And it also made sense if you think about how that data is structured. So when you have a profile picture in SharePoint, there's really two pieces to it. For your profile, there is a value that says profile picture URL. And that is just a regular web URL. And that web URL goes to your MySites. And if you log into your MySite host as the MySite host administrator, you will see a library that is all of the profile pictures, actually 3 copies of all the profile pictures. And that is what that URL points to. So when the user profile sync is syncing your pictures from SharePoint to AD, it reads that value, that URL value, to see the URL to the picture, then goes out to that URL to grab the picture. In this customer's case, their MySite was, protected with SSL. So when FIM tried to go out to get that picture, it was going to HTTPS, blah, blah, blah. That's where this certificate was coming into play. It was trying to download that picture. Mark in the chat room is guessing CRL, the certificate revocation list. Close. That shows you know what you're doing. That was not the case here. And the certificate revocation list is every issuing authority holds this CRL, the certificate revocation list. And if a certificate becomes invalid for whatever reason, it can be revoked. Things check that. Not the case, so that's a good one to check. So it had been so long since I'd done all this, and what we finally figured out was SharePoint, inside of its managed trusts setting, inside of security and central admin, also keeps track of all your certificates. And they had uploaded the certificate, the new certificate there, and we could go in and we could see it. But what I had forgotten and what the customer just had never dealt with was SharePoint doesn't look at the Windows certificate store. It only looks at this managed trusts. And they had uploaded their new certificate there, which was smart. But what they didn't know that they had to do was inside of that certificate. So you go into central admin, security, managed trusts, and you got your certificates in there. They uploaded the certificate, but inside of that certificate settings, when you click it at the bottom, there's a place that mentions uploading the root, the issuer's certificate. So basically telling SharePoint to trust the issuer. And that was what they hadn't done. And they probably had done it the first time, but when they got their new certificate, it had a different issuer, so the old one didn't match. So we went into certificate management on Windows, exported out that trusted server, imported it into SharePoint, ran a full sync, and everything was great. But that one took a long time. That was kind of a weird one. And I do after we got into that one, Tristan Watkins from the UK had a blog post on it, and it does a good job talking about that. So that was just kind of want to refresh everybody. I think we all kind of forget about that certificate store there in central admin, but it caused us a lot of issues. The other thing is when you're troubleshooting SharePoint, don't forget to troubleshoot Windows, because that was kind of the key to it. We saw that error in the applications log, and that was what led us to it. So thanks to Tristan for that blog post. That was an interesting one. For the last couple of minutes here, I'm going to talk about some Windows Phone tips. There's been some cool things that have shown up that I wanted to talk about a little bit. The first one is really old, and this one's several months old, but it's kind of cool, and I'm going to talk about it. For the podcast, for a couple of years now, I've had the screen behind me that's kind of got some stuff on it, and I move that back and forth as I move through topics. I initially kind of did that to be kind of cool. I had this extra monitor, but it also helps me when I'm editing to see when transitions happen. But for the longest time, I've had this monitor hooked up to my Surface Pro, which is sitting down here, and then I look over there and I hit the little slide button on PowerPoint, and that works pretty well. But now I got this Windows Phone, and a couple of months ago, Microsoft released this app called Office Remote. And the Office Remote allows you, with your Windows Phone, to control PowerPoint. So I've got this Office Remote app here, and this is my slideshow. So you can see right now the topics thing is there, and I can use this Windows Phone app to advance my slides. So I'm going to hit the button on here, then watch over my shoulder, and you'll see that it advances. And so I can do this with my phone. Now, as a guy who does a lot of public speaking, this has a bunch of features that are pretty cool. One is, it's got all the stuff. I can go to first, I can go to last, I can do all that kind of stuff. If I have notes inside of my slides, they can show up on here also. So I can use this kind of to prompt. I can hold it in my hand like a clicker and then look down at my notes. But that's kind of fun. Free app uses Bluetooth, so there's a Bluetooth connection between my phone and my computer in PowerPoint right now. But that's a cool one. Office Remote is what that's called. It's in the Windows Phone App Store. Another one that I wanted to mention, and this is a newer one. This came out, I think, last week. Microsoft finally released an official File Explorer app for Windows Phone. All of the phone folks, and I think, Apple started this with the iPhone, don't want us to think about our phones as having a file system. They want that to be a black box to us. But we're all nerds, and we all think of that as a file system. We all know that's what's going on in the background. And so there's been kind of some reluctance on the phone OS manufacturers to provide those kind of things with the OS. But when Microsoft has finally come around, Windows Phone has it now. It's a pretty simple little app. It's just called Files. It lets you browse, it lets you move, create, and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't integrate with apps very well, so you're not going to see it drop downs. You can't pick where you download things or anything like that. But it's a good step. I've used it to manage some of my music, see what's out there. Another free one. Just go to the Windows Store and look for Files is what it's called. Another one. So I'm running the Windows Phone 8.1 developer preview. Have fun with that one. And that comes with Cortana. Cortana is the digital assistant thing. It's kind of like Siri. It's kind of like Google Now. And when Cortana came out, it got a lot of fanfare, and it was kind of cool, but I really struggled with applicable uses for it. You could ask it, why did the chicken cross the road, and things like that, who's your daddy, that kind of stuff. But really actually getting anything done with it was kind of tough. But then, as I've been talking to folks, it's good for reminders, things like that. And so remind me tomorrow morning to email my wife, that kind of stuff. It knows all that kind of stuff. But it can also do a bunch of great location stuff. And I think we talked about this before. You can tell it, to remind you to do something the next time you're at a place. So this is, I've used this for a couple of weeks now, maybe a couple of months. Things like, next time I'm at the store, remind me to buy milk. Next time I go to the store, and when you give it that kind of, when you give Cortana that kind of a command, it will ask you where you mean by store. So you don't have to worry about it not guessing the right place. So like if I say, the next time I'm at Walmart, remind me to pick up a birthday card from my mom, it will say, do you mean the Walmart at this location, the Walmart at this location, or any location? It's kind of cool like that. So I've been using that for a while, but I come up with a new use for this last week, and I kind of wanted to share it because it's one of those first world type problems that I've had for a long time, and now I've actually got a technological way to fix it. So I don't know about you guys, but anytime a high schooler comes to my door with some kind of fundraising something, or I guess not even high schooler, but a student of some sort, I buy it, whether I need it or not. It's good karma. I got a couple of kids. I know that, at some point I'm going to have to be schlepping around selling this stuff too. So even if they're, selling free admission to a man-eating zoo, I'm going to buy some just to help them out. So one of the things that always irritates me is one of the things around here, the football team or something like that, sells these big coupon books. And there's coupons for all kinds of local businesses, and it's, $5 off this, free Blizzard the next time you buy a Blizzard at Dairy Queen, that kind of stuff. But I never remember to use the dumb things. Now, it's not a big deal. I'm not in it for that. I'm in it to help the cause. So if I shell out $20 for the coupon book and never use one, it's not a big deal. But it's kind of the principle of the matter that I've got them and I don't use them. The other thing is, those businesses are paying to be in there, and I want to give those businesses the feedback that that's a good thing. They should keep doing that. So I have this angst about not using these coupons. And my wife and I were talking about this last week because we were going to go out. We had a sitter. We were going to do a date night. We had this coupons hanging on the fridge. We're like, we're probably going to eat there and probably going to go there. We will never remember to use these things. And then it occurred to me, Cortana can help. So what I did was, I whipped out my phone, had it in my pocket, and I'm like, the next time I'm at Fuji Steakhouse, remind me to use a coupon. And so Cortana's like, Fuji Steakhouse at blah, blah, blah. I'm like, absolutely. And then I took a couple of coupons and threw them in my car. Sure enough, we pull up Friday night. I'm getting ready to get out. My phone vibrates. It's Cortana. She's like, use coupons. How awesome is that? So just great little things like that. I'm starting to figure out Cortana a little bit, starting to get some value from it. So that's a good one. Some of these ideas I've gotten from other people. So if you have good ideas on how to use Cortana, again, send me a tweet at Todd Klindt or email me todd.klindt@rackspace.com and let me know how you're getting value out of Cortana besides, just asking, or is it going to rain tomorrow or things like that. But all those little things, I'm starting to get into it. I'm starting to think about Cortana now when I've got these kind of tasks. So that was another thing that I wanted to mention about Windows Phone, and we'll see how this works with me using my Dealio. Yeah, this should work. I think there's Cortana now. So another one of the new things from the Windows 8.1 thing is the notification center at the top. So if you've got your phone, you drag down, you get your notifications. One of my frustrations with this is the context. So I use it probably most for email. It alerts you, you get a notification when you get email. So if I'm in the Office Remote app like I am now, I scroll down from the notification center and I hit an email, it brings me to the email. Hooray! Just like I would think. If I delete that email or hit the back button, instead of taking me to my inbox, which is where I expect to go when I close an email message, it takes me back to the app that I was at. That makes perfect sense. Irritating as all get out, but it makes perfect sense. So I was kind of frustrated with that. But what I discovered this week was if I don't select an individual email, if I hit the topic, so you can see here, my top email address is Todd Klindt. If instead of hitting the email, if I hit the application, then it takes me to the application, and then I'm in the right context. All the emails are there. I can delete them, go back and forth, and all that kind of stuff. But it puts me where I expect to be. So that's kind of handy. The other thing that I read about on the web about the notification center was if you've got a bunch of notifications, you can swipe them to the side to make them go away. But if you've got a bunch of notifications, that's kind of a pain in the tuchus. But what you can do is if you do a two-finger swipe, which this demo is obviously not very well planned because I only have one thing here, but you can do a two-finger swipe. You can't see it. There it went. But if you do a two-finger swipe, it clears out all of your notifications. So that was another one that was kind of a problem. And there's also a clear all button on there, but the two-finger swipe, depending on how you're at, is there. So those are a couple of cool ones. Overall, still pretty happy with Windows Phone 8.1. I've been doing the Windows Phone thing for about 9 months now. Treating me pretty well. Not regretting it yet. But the 8.1 stuff has kind of breathed a new life into it. So I went and closed the Office Remote app. I'm great at this. So now on to shameless self-promotion. Here in a month or so, I'm going to be flying down to Sydney, Australia for the Sharing the Point conference down there. That is July 15th and 16th in Sydney at the Hilton there downtown. I was talking to some of the folks at the Sydney SharePoint user groups. Look like I'll be crashing that as well. I don't know what I'll be talking about or doing, but talked to Ivan Wilson and John Liu down there and going to be making that happen. If you're in the Sydney area, for goodness sake, swing by. If you're not going to the conference, I get that. Those things are expensive. It's during the day and all that kind of stuff. please come to the user group that night and swing by and say, hey, just stop by. They have food there, drinks, all that kind of stuff. Last time I was there, they broke the food out early, so you can get the food and then leave before I start talking. Kind of the best of both worlds. I would do it if I could. So definitely hope to see you down there. Mark in the chat room is asking, wasn't I just down there? I was there a year ago. I went to this conference last year. I forget what month it was. April-ish, I forget. But yeah, and the funny thing is I was down there and I talked at their conference and they didn't hate me and they asked me back, which was kind of cool. So I like that. Good folks down there. But so I'll be in Sydney, July 15th and 16th. And then the next week I will be in Auckland, New Zealand, July 22nd and 23rd for the same conference over in New Zealand. And I'll be doing my much heralded and much loved load testing with Visual Studio session and PowerShell with SharePoint online. So those will both be pretty good. And then got a couple more conferences looking at for the rest of the year. Nothing confirmed yet, so I don't want to announce them, but we've got a few other things going on. So stay tuned, and I will let you know when I'm accepted. So thanks, everybody. I apologize to the folks in the chat room. They had some trouble getting attached to Ustream tonight, so I might look into YouTube and see how that is for streaming this. But thanks, everybody. Chat room is lively tonight. I appreciate it. All you hooligans out there being hooligan-y. But anyway, this Netcast happens every Monday night at 8:30 Central U.S. time, and you can log into it at toddklindt.com/netcast. You can, there's chat room and all that kind of stuff. You can join. It's just a regular IRC chat room. You can always hit me up on Twitter at Todd Klindt or email me at todd.klindt@rackspace.com. Thanks, everybody. Next week, I'm going to be in San Antonio, so hopefully we'll be able to do this from the castle or my hotel room or something. It's always kind of a struggle when I'm on the road, especially I'm only going to be gone for a couple of days, so I'm not taking a big suitcase. We'll see how I can get this going. But so Shane should be there for that one. He always kind of drags me down a little bit, but he loves you guys. He loves being on the show. He always asks about you guys. So I'll probably let him ride my coattails a little bit. But that'll be next week for Netcast 203, and I'll see you then. So thanks, everybody, and have a good night.